Hey, everybody, and welcome to And Action Filmmaking Podcast. I'm Tommy DiNucci, and as always, I'm here with Mike Messier. And today we have a very fun topic. We're going to be talking about the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, that is Lennox Lewis. I got a chance to produce a documentary about Lennox Lewis called Lennox Lewis, The Untold Story a while back. And it was actually Lennox's birthday just a couple days ago on September 2nd. So here we are as we record on September 5th. So happy birthday to the champ. But before we get into that, Mikey, how the hell are you?
I'm okay, buddy. It's good to be here, Tommy, and interesting topic. I'm a big fan of boxing from the 90s, and I was happy to do some what was called script consulting for this one. And I watched the documentary today. It's available on Peacock. So if people have a Peacock membership, if you're a WWE fan, that's where you get all your WWE wrestling. If you're a fan of The Office, that's where you'll get The Office. And if you want to watch this, it's prominently displayed Tough Love, what they call Tough Love. And then when the movie starts, it has a different title, Lennox Lewis, The Untold Story. So it's got a few different titles, but pretty fascinating process. This documentary is a mosaic unto itself, I would say.
It really was, Mike, and it was a as they say, it's kind of funny when I looked at the date on this one and saw that it came out in 2020, which seems fairly recent. I said to myself, "Wow, 2020," because I think we started working on this movie in like 2016. I feel like we worked on this one was on and off for a couple years, and then it did what we say it was on the shelf for a little while, just waiting for the right distribution deal. And then, of course, I remember this movie being really, for me, the first, like, really, and, I sound like a real selfish asshole for saying this because a lot of people lost a lot more than this. But this was the first situation where I realized pandemic was kind of real. And this was kind of like the first uh, big L to pandemic in the sense that we were ready to show this movie at the Tribeca Film Festival. We had an amazing slot for it. We were ready to go. And then, of course, I think it was, what really within the first couple weeks of the shit hitting the proverbial fan, that entire film festival was canceled. So I remember being really bummed. And I feel like to this day, this movie never truly got its flowers. It never truly got the recognition it deserves. And we're hoping today that we can shed a little light on that, and maybe more people can go out and check it out. Because, again, I really do think that the fact that it never got that kind of release at a film festival, got people talking about it, got people excited. I think that was a big miss for this movie.
I agree, Tommy, and I remember when that happened, and I was upset about it, and I mean, obviously, pandemic killed people, so I mean, that's ultimately the more important thing. But there are casualties like this to a situation like that as well, so that might inspire me to get another vaccine shot, buddy. I haven't gotten one in over a year, but in any event, the, the disrespect or the disregard you discuss for this documentary, oddly enough, kind of parallels the disrespect and disregard that Lennox Lewis had as a boxing legend in my book. Because when people talk about that era of boxing, a lot of times they go right to Mike Tyson. I thoroughly disagree with that. Mike Tyson had a great run, but he never avenged a professional defeat. He lost to Lennox Lewis, he lost to Evander Holyfield, and he lost to James Buster Douglas, and then a couple of tomato cans at the end of his career. And people always say how great Mike Tyson is, but he never beat anyone that had previously beaten him. Meanwhile, Lennox Lewis avenged his only two defeats, and he beat, in my book, he beat Evander Holyfield twice, although the first decision was a draw. And he beat Tyson. He would have beaten Riddick Bowe if Bowe would have fought him, which is covered in the doc. And, he overcame Oliver McCall and Hasim Rahman, the guys that beat him.
And let's not forget beating Klitschko as his last fight. That was the fight that he decided to call it a career. So Klitschko went on to be I guess you could say, the torchbearer of the next generation of heavyweights, and Lennox beat him on the way out the door. So yeah, you're right, man. And listen, we're gonna do our best to keep this episode as digestible to the non-boxing fans as possible. But the reality is, this movie's all about not just boxing, but there's a major boxing backdrop here. and it's hard for guys like Mike and I who, like Mike said, are just big fans of that era. What people need to understand that aren't boxing fans, and I'm gonna maybe sound like an old timer saying this, but the reality is late 80s into early to mid 90s boxing was just very special. There were a lot of exciting fighters to watch that had great personalities and personas that you'd want to actually see go out and do their thing beyond the sport itself. And really, you got to understand, guys, this is before the era of mixed martial arts. There is no UFC. That's not a thing. I mean, UFC became a company in 1994, and really it wasn't for, several years before they became, looked at like a legitimate fight sport, quote unquote. So boxing was king, and the '90s was really the last run of, in my opinion, the true kings of boxing.
Yeah, Tommy, you make a great point, and I think a lot of people, if you were to just put some real rough draft type of thinking on this, the '70s were the heavyweights with Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, Ernie Shavers, many more. The '80s, the early '80s at least, were kind of the big four of the middleweights: Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Thomas the Hitman Hearns. There's a really good 4-part documentary online about that. I think it's from HBO. And then the '90s go right back to the heavyweights. And yes, although I'm not a Tyson fan, give Tyson credit. He's the one that kind of made the heavyweight division so exciting, mostly because of him and Don King's promotion. Another guy that I don't care for, but got to give him credit. He was, as the documentary says, the longest running pimp in the game, Don King. And moving forward, Lennox Lewis, in my opinion, him and Holyfield were really the heart and soul of the heavyweight division in the '90s. And Lennox, maybe because he was a little bit younger, took a little less damage than Holyfield did in some of these fights. I think Lennox carried into 2003 when he finally retired after that Vitaly Klitschko victory. So yeah, man, boxing's a great sport, but I think like a lot of things in life, Tommy, boxing's greatest opponent is boxing. When you talk about corrupt decisions, promoters that are a bit sketchy, boxing gets it in his own way, and I think you're
Sure.
right. Mixed martial arts, with Dana White at the helm, has kind of overcome boxing when people think who's the toughest man alive, and even who's the toughest woman alive in some cases.
Yeah, I really think that that's got a big factor in it. I mean, people say that all the time, like, "How come boxing's not popular like it used to be?" I got 3 letters for you, UFC. The reality is a casual fan who just wants to, take advantage of that gladiatorial love, harken back to their Romans at the Colosseum days. They wanna see some combat. They wanna see some people throw hands, and the reality is boxing matches from the naked eye, the casual observer, if you're not a fight fan, if you don't understand all the science behind what's going on behind every exchange, for a casual fan who just wants to watch 2 guys get in there and bang it out, mixed martial arts is just such a better product in terms of it's more exciting, it's faster paced. There's 3 rounds or 5 rounds, depending upon if it's a title fight, as opposed to 10 or 12 rounds. So I think that product itself is just designed more for like instant fan gratification, unlike boxing, where again, they call it the sweet science for a reason. Let's check in with a couple of our folks here. Stephen E, what's up, brother? Thank you for checking in late with us today. Scott, always great to have you, brother. Today we're bringing the show to you a little bit late, but we're happy to put on a show nonetheless. Mike had an appointment earlier. I had a couple of engagements I had to get in and out of. So we're coming at you a little late, but better late than never. So let me tell you a little bit about the backstory of this movie. At the time, I was working very closely with Verdi Productions, and we had just come off of a film called Man in the Red Bandana, which is all about Wells Remy Crowther, who's a hero of 9/11. And we kind of proved a model that Verdi Productions and myself, really, of course, Chad Verdi being the Verdi in Verdi Productions, and myself and Sam Eilertson working kind of the technical side of things, literally in the editing room with this footage almost every day. We took a documentary that had already been shot and we put our creative spin on it and put together something that we were all really proud of. Uh, well, then Chad Verdi got this Lennox Lewis story, kind of came across his desk, and a lot of the footage had already been shot, but and a cut had been put together, but it just, it needed a little bit more cinematic polishing and just to be kind of put together in a slightly different way. Because documentary film, guys, and we've done episodes on documentary filmmaking before, it's a different animal. When you're telling a story that doesn't rely on actors, that doesn't really, naturally there are sometimes people shoot cinematic sort of renderings of things and reenactments, but for the most part you have a different challenge because you've got to tell your story with talking heads, basically, with interviews. So it's just all about how we put that together. I started working with Sam Eilertson and watching all the footage. A gentleman by the name of Rick Lezies, by the way, and Seth Koch, um, they were instrumental in kind of getting all the footage and getting to making all these interviews happen because there are some amazing interviews in this movie. We spoke a lot with Lennox Lewis, and of course you got Tyson in there. It's kind of a who's who. Jim Lampley, who's a famous boxing commentator. Um, just a lot of legends of boxing. Again, if you're not a fight fan, these people's names might not mean anything to you. But if you are a fight fan, I mean, like, these are like the best. This is the cream of the crop. So basically, this movie just needed a little TLC in the editing room, and that's kind of what we did. I remember Sam and I kind of like pouring through the footage and just trying to get to the most exciting elements of it. And Mike, while we were going through these exciting moments and pouring through all of the interview footage, we stumbled upon, in my opinion, one of the most exciting stories and interesting stories I've ever been a part of in my life.
Yeah, that's I believe you're talking about the Kelly Maloney story, which was it was Lennox's trainer, I believe, correct, or part of the team and
Manager,
manager.
manager.
Thank you. Yeah, manager. He born as a he was the manager of Lennox Lewis through all these exciting fights, through the championship reigns and everything. Always there in Lennox's corner, and then but had a secret, and the secret was he felt that he identified as a woman. And after his, days of working with Lennox were over, I believe he's quoted in the doc as saying, I was having this crisis, and my
She,
daughter,
she was quoted.
she was quoted as saying, I was having this crisis, and my daughter said to me, Dad, I'd rather have you in a skirt than in a box, meaning that if you don't live your truth, you might commit suicide. And that's, often we hear about this whole debate, and we won't go down the rabbit hole of the debate, but we hear about this with people talking about kids, kids that want to transgender. If they don't do it, will or will they not commit suicide? But in this situation, it was Kelly's daughter when he was a he, before he transitioned, telling him, Dad, I'd rather have you in a dress than in a box. Very poignant quote, and that's in the Lennox docs. So I know that that has kind of led to the Kelly Maloney documentary as well.
Yeah, as I was watching this footage with Sam and of course Chad was you know Chad, our producer, was taken aback by the story. And I know Rick already knew it was an amazing story. We kind of all looked at each other and we're like, guys, this needs to be a movie as well. Like, this is, some really interesting stuff here. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far just because, we've done a show about Knockout Blonde and that movie will eventually come out. But I just immediately was fascinated as I was pouring through all the footage. Because, guys, when you're making a documentary, really when you're editing anything, you're a detective working on a cold case murder. And what I mean by that is you've got all this information. There's no people around anymore to really talk to, right? Like, most of the people are gone. You're just in the editing room and you have to revisit everything. Like in the investigations, the investigators will revisit all of these files and reread the interviews that we did with all the eyewitnesses. And hey, maybe we can go try to dig up those photos again. Is there something we missed? Well, it's the same thing when you're editing. You go through all the footage again and again and again because you'd be amazed how easy it is to miss one little moment that maybe is only 5 seconds long because you looked away or you checked your phone or you got up to go to the bathroom or whatever it is. You got to just watch that shit over and over. And as Sam and I kind of painstakingly watched every piece of footage, we slowly just found these amazing gems to tell the story, and that's kind of where it came about. Also, really terrific. Uh, Once we had the cut to a certain point, we had a really terrific voiceover in this movie by Dr. Dre himself. So I think that, getting that attachment and having Dre be a part of this movie, that was really like a big shot in the arm. And again, it's a part of the movie that people just really don't talk about. Again, like I think that this movie, I don't want to say the movie got screwed, but like I really think it's a great and very digestible boxing documentary that people just don't really know much about because it came out during really one of the most scary
Right.
and fucked up times in American history. Like, who was thinking about a boxing documentary during that stretch?
I think part of it also, Tommy, is that you guys or you specifically asked me to serve as a script consultant. I looked back through my emails and found basically the script that I sent to you, which you guys used some of and didn't use some of, and that's part of the creative process too. And I remember going back in my mind to our discussions about this at the time, and you're right, it was going back to like 2016. And I'll just say it from my perspective. I think the thing with Lennox, he's such a nice guy and such a regular guy. And it sounds like a backhanded insult, but it's not. It's almost like beyond being excellent in boxing, there's not a real, and he overcame some childhood troubles, of course. But he doesn't have he doesn't have any addictions. He doesn't have any violence outside of boxing. He's never been arrested. And I'm not saying that to insult him. I'm saying that he's a really good citizen. But do good citizens make great documentaries? In this case, it did. But you had to, in my opinion, Tommy, the earliest draft of this movie before you touched it or Ivan saw it or anything, or Sam, was that it was very built around the Mike Tyson Lennox Lewis fight in 2002. As a boxing fan, having watched this stuff in real time when I was, a teenager and older, I disagreed with that because to me, the climax of Lennox's career was the two fights with Lennox Lewis and the Mike Tyson victory, who had
Or
already lost.
Holyfield.
Holyfield, thank you. Yeah,
Holyfield.
the two fights with Evander Holyfield were the climax of Lennox Lewis's career. And the Mike Tyson fight in Memphis was kind of an afterthought because Tyson had already lost to Lennox twice. He had already lost to James Buster Douglas. He had already served time in prison and was never the same. So for me, the emphasis on Mike, as great as Mike's his own movie. I mean, Mike
Yeah.
doesn't, Mike's his own movie. For me, the problem with the earliest drafts of this documentary, which were fixed by the time people see it now, was that this shadow of Mike Tyson, just like it overshadowed Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, and everybody else, it overshadowed Lennox at his own dock. And I think once it just became clear to me, at least, the excellence of Lennox Lewis in the ring, it's okay if that's the focus because that's what it's all about. He's a boxer, he's a pugilist, he's a chess player, and we don't need to make up stuff that's not there. And I think the interesting thing is that this whole time he's got this person in his corner with this secret that becomes their own story, her own story, the Kelly Maloney story. So in a sense, it's very fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, Mike. There's a lot more to Lennox's career than people think. Again, we're not talking about a kid who grew up around a white picket fence in a wonderful little nuclear family. We're talking about a guy who had a very young mother. His father left. Was born in basically as a child. Spent parts of his life in Jamaica, in the UK, and in Canada. So we're talking about a young man by the age of 17, 18, graduating from high school. He's already lived in 3 different countries, been exposed to a lot of different cultures. Very smart guy. And the interesting thing about it is, for the most part, and yes, he was raised by his mother, but like, his mother had to go to work, so he was like, there were many years where he was basically being raised by his grandparents, I believe. So Lennox, don't get it twisted. Like, he didn't have an easy upbringing. But like Mike said, you know, didn't he's a family man, right? He's a good father. He's a good husband. He's got a beautiful wife, and he treats her right, and he doesn't sleep around just because he's a celebrity with millions and millions of dollars. So again, you're right on that, Mike. You know, unfortunately, the human condition, we like to see a fucked up story. You know,
Yeah.
nobody wants to see a pretty picture all the time. And when we come home late at night, we, you know, come home from work and put something on TV. Sometimes we'd rather see a car wreck than a an ocean liner sailing through the water. You know, we want to see that idea of. I would love to know. I'm not a psychologist, but I would love to know what it is about the human condition that we just want to see this bad shit all the time. And listen, I'm the biggest fucking victim. Almost every night, I'll watch some form of like a murder show, whether it's Dateline or the first 48 hours. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know why I want to watch this fucking shit. It's depressing, but there's a part of me that my soul longs for it, Mike. Let's just check in real quick. Stephen E says, "I'm so marvelous." That's that's Marvin's theme song. I got to check that one out on YouTube. I don't think I've ever heard that one.
Yeah.
Scott catching the show during a workout. Well, brother, get a couple extra reps for Mikey and I, please.
Yeah. Drink your
Um,
water. Tommy, I would let me jump on that point because I think about that time. You know, my mom about 10 years ago, she was really into these horrible, you know, Lifetime movies and documentaries about women getting killed by their boyfriends, and I was always coming to her house thinking, "Mom, how can you watch this stuff? This is god awful," you know, and. Uh, 10 years later, I'm watching all that stuff, man. So I mean, I think some of it is Tommy. I'm watching a documentary now about the Hillsong Church kind of cult, and I've watched a lot of cult documentaries and a lot of murder documentaries, missing people, all this stuff. I think what it might be, Tommy, is sometimes it makes us feel better about our own lives. Like, hey, things may not be perfect, but at least I'm not in a cult. At least I'm not killing somebody, or nobody's killing
at
me.
least I'm not in someone's trunk right now.
Yeah, and I think we do have a fascination. Same thing. I was going to say we have a fascination with the morbid. Same thing why people love horror movies, Tommy. I mean, and you as a creator of horror films, you know this. People love to live in that horror world, although we don't want that monster in our closet or that serial killer slicing us up. We want to see that on the big screen. So it's interesting.
I think I can sum it up like this, Mike. It's nice when bad things happen to other people and not us.
Especially
As
if they're
fucked up as
fictional.
that sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Well, yeah. So moving along, Lennox Lewis, the Untold story. I really think you guys should check it out if you haven't seen it. Like Mike said, it's on Hulu, and there's a lot of just amazing little moments in the story. You know, it's kind of funny. Here are a couple of things. A couple of the controversies. This is a sign of the times. Um, in the '90s, when Lennox was on top, a couple of the controversies that did surround him, if there were any, and there weren't many, there were some rumors that he was gay. I remember that being a thing. I remember that getting around to the point where when I did research for this documentary, there were actual newspaper reporters that were putting out basically ads, basically saying like, "We will pay you an enormous amount of money," and these are trashy newspapers, but like any woman who's been on a date with Lennox will pay you money to hear the full story, or you know, like trying to basically like find out the truth about his sexuality. And it's kind of funny because if you look at it behind the lens of 2023 eyes, nowadays it would be like, okay, I mean, yeah, sure, it would be newsworthy, but like nobody would care. It wouldn't be something that was, it's not going to end this guy's career, you know what I
It
mean?
would
But
it
it
would be
shows you a
even
sign of the
beneficial.
times.
It would be beneficial to his career now because then it would be equality and everything.
Yeah, I mean the other thing that I think is very funny about Lennox is I guess you could say what they used to try to come after him about was Lennox may or may not have smoked an occasional joint, was a little bit of a weed guy, like long before it was. Think about how fucking normal it is now. We have so many athletes. I mean, Mike Tyson has a fucking weed line where he sells marijuana.
Yeah.
And these are, you know, we have many athletes today that are considered fine-tuned specimens of what a human being should be physically, and they're getting high every fucking day, and nobody bats an eyelash at it. Whereas back in the '90s, if you smoked weed, man, kids today don't know. Like in the '90s, weed was a drug. Like you were on drugs. Like and this is right down to like law enforcement considered it a fucking narcotic. Like you're gonna get in serious trouble for weed. And I think it also had this attitude that, or I shouldn't say attitude. We've learned so much due to research. I've done some of that research myself. That weed is terrific for your joints and you lubricates your body and pain management. You know, it's an alternate medicine that a lot of athletes use to recover. And it's kind of funny because Lennox was a little bit ahead of the curve. I mean, he was basically self-medicating with weed before it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, you think about, was it the career of Ricky Williams, the NFL player that was basically blackballed, sacrificed in the name of weed? As wrestling fans, we have to mention RVD, Rob Van Dam, 420. He was kind of ahead of the curve with marijuana in pro wrestling, but he and Sabu got pulled over and arrested for having weed, and he had to give up the WWE World Title because of it, and that was going back to 2006. So, yeah, man, it's interesting, Tommy, that things that happened in our lifetime, even in our memory, the career of Lennox Lewis, you know, things change so much. And now we're at a point in our age, you can relate to this, Stephen, he can relate to this, where we can see things in our teens and our childhood that are vastly different than the world we live in now. And you think about when you had your grandfather talk about World War II and all the things that they would say about stuff like that, and we would think, that old guy is crazy. I'll never be like that. Well, now we're the old crazy guys. Thinking about how weed was such a horrible thing once upon a time.
Yeah, I mean, I tell, I work with a lot of younger people, on movies, a lot of, PAs are sometimes 18, 19 years old. And it's so funny. And again, I must sound like I'm fucking ancient when I tell them this, but I'm like, you guys have no idea how crazy it is to me that you can, still to this day, it shocks me that you can just drive to a store, walk in the building, and purchase weed. No card, no license, no nothing. It's okay. It's legal. It's because remember when we were kids, like you were getting locked up and they were throwing away the key if you got caught with weed. Whereas nowadays it's all good. So yeah, it's a sign of the times, and it's better that way. Because let's face it, I don't remember hearing about too many crazy fist fights or brawls that have ever broken out over a bunch of kids smoking a couple J's. You don't really hear about that. You hear about with alcohol. And again, I don't want to turn this show into a pro weed show, but like, how many times do we hear about a drunken brawl and a drunken melee breaks out and people just get fucking violent and belligerent when they're drunk? Weed just doesn't have that stigma, So I think it's a healthy thing.
Well, Tommy, prohibition was once part of our country. I think that lasted for 4 or 5 years. And repeal day was December 5th. That's when you could legally drink again in the United States. I believe the year was 1938. And December 5th, although not 1938, is my birthday, Tommy. So I was born on the day that you could have a drink in honor of drinking. But it's interesting, and we could do a whole debate show. You could put this on your other podcast, Rushmore, the 4 greatest vices, everybody's 4 favorite vices, because alcohol seems to be the number 1 vice of the United States anyway, and probably a lot of countries. And marijuana, weed, probably number 2 right up there, and probably chocolate and pizza, 3 and 4, at least for me. And probably pornography is number 5 for a lot of folks. Boy, we're doing a whole other podcast here, Tom. But
yeah, I don't know where we're going on this one, Mikey. But the reality is,
I was trying to push your Rushmore show.
Yeah, well, I can think of a few other way cooler vices that you didn't put on the list. But basically, Lennox Lewis was the kind of guy who was so squeaky clean that, in a weird way, I think it affected his legacy in that sense. However, I will tell you this much: I'm just seeing now. Internet culture is an amazing thing. They call it meme culture or GIF culture. I'm just seeing now on a lot of these kind of sports type, big sports social media following type. What am I trying to say? Big platforms. Yeah, big accounts that post a lot of various, whether it's geared towards boxing, whether it's geared towards MMA or sport, whatever it is. They're just starting to give Lennox Lewis his due. Like I just saw one of those videos the other day, like someone posted just like a 1 minute clip of like like something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing, but the caption was like, people forget how good Lennox Lewis really was, or like, we forget what a legend this guy was. And it was just like a highlight reel of him doing his thing. And again, it's unfortunate that sometimes being humble, being the better person, so to speak. Yeah, we'll all think back and say, "Wow, what a great guy," but sometimes you don't get remembered as much. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about what a terrific, really specimen for a documentary Lennox was, because again, there's a lot of mystery behind this guy. I don't think a lot of I don't know that Lennox knew as much about himself as he did after the fact. Like, I think Lennox learned about a lot about himself by doing this documentary. Um, so it was really cool to see that. Also, another kind of really nice thing, that I loved about the documentary is this documentary is also like a story of friendship. I would say the story of friendship between Lennox and his best friend in the whole world, Courtney Shan, who Courtney Shan was basically Lennox's right-hand man. They played football together in high school, and Courtney went on to be a big strength and conditioning coach for Lennox, and really pushing him in the gym and keeping him accountable. Was there to literally hold him when he lost, and pick him up when he won. So Courtney Shan is a really cool character in this doc, and it's great to kind of see that uh, their journey kind of grew together. And I love that, because to me, the sign of like a good person, and what the fuck do I know? But at least this is my 2 cents. The sign of a really grounded and good person is, no matter how much fame or success they reach, they always stay true to their roots, and they stick by the people that stuck by them when it really mattered. And Lennox easily could have, he's the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. He could have gotten rid of Courtney Shan and hired, name that Hollywood strength coach, or top notch athlete. Whoever the Russian in Rocky Four was using, could have hired him.
The guy
My point
selling
is,
the Gazelle. Yeah, the guy selling the Gazelle in the late night infomercials.
Tony Little. Yeah, my point is, like, it's cool it shows you what kind of person Lennox was, that like from the very beginning to the very end, he had his best friend by his side the whole way, and not just by his side as a cheerleader, literally training him in the gym.
Yeah, earning a paycheck. And Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, but was it the guy's name is Courtney, right? Was that
Yeah.
gentleman? He's telling a story, and we flash back to a reenactment of a football scenario where the two young men were Lennox and his friend were playing football, and they lost a very big game, like a city championship game or a state championship game, and they're on the football bus, like the team bus, leaving after this crushing defeat, and the whole team is upset. Guys are crying, and Lennox is just looking out the window with kind of this, like, almost like a smile on his face. And Courtney's like, Lennox, how can you be smiling? We just lost this huge game. And Lennox is just saying, I've got bigger things in my mind. And he was thinking about bigger things, which became, I believe he won an Olympic gold medal, didn't he, Tommy, over Riddick Bowe?
He did. Lennox is an Olympic champion, so pretty damn impressive there. There aren't too many Olympic gold medalists that go on to be the world champion in their respective division as well. So that's a short list that he's on, and that's a great reenactment, Mike. I've noticed that with a lot of like really successful people, and maybe we can all learn a little something about this, about confidence. But a lot of really successful people, even when you go and watch the Arnold documentary, which I know it seems like I bring that up every episode, but a lot of these type of, people that stand the test of time in terms of success and longevity, you hear that kind of talk. They all kind of believe that it's going to happen. They believe it before anyone else does. They're their number one believer. So I think that we can all kind of, learn something from this doc in that sense. All the success that Lennox had growing up in 3 different countries, really not having a father in his life at all. He was, as they say, up against it. Yet through all that, he believed, like, no, I'm going to get to the top of the world, really. I mean, we're literally talking about the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And real quick, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, just to tell you what undisputed means. It's not like just another pretty way of saying he's the best. In boxing, there are multiple companies, basically, you could call it. There are different federations, and each federation has a title. At the time, there were three major federations, uh, the IBF, the WBA, and I believe the WBC.
You got it.
And yeah, and basically these three federations each had their own world champion. They each had a title belt for their respective league, if you will. And once in a while, all of the great power brokers in boxing would get together and they would put together a fight to decide who the undisputed champion was, the person who would basically hold all of those titles at once. So no one could talk any kind of shit about who's the best because they literally hold all the fucking titles. So that's what an undisputed champion is.
And that's where we had the Lennox Lewis versus Evander Holyfield, two fights, March of '89, March of '99, and December of '99. And as the documentary shows, and I looked at my notes from this thing, and it was presented in a great way. Lennox basically had to overcome a corrupt decision in the first fight where he clearly won the first fight, and somehow they come up with a draw. And guess what? Evander Holyfield is being promoted by Don King. And in the second fight, I thought the second fight was a lot closer. I still think Lennox won the second fight via decision, Tommy, but I think that Holyfield was much better in the second fight. But Lennox won the second fight with a unanimous decision. So go figure. It's boxing. And then Lennox still had a few more big fights in him that we see in the doc with Tyson and so forth, and even traded the title with Hakeem Rockman, who was a really interesting guy as well. And Lennox Lewis got distracted for that Rockman fight. Tommy, he was doing a little bit of acting in the movie Ocean's 11, I believe. So Hollywood did come a calling a few times for Lennox, but I don't even think he really. I don't want to put my words in his mouth, but I don't think he cared that much about Hollywood. I think Lennox loved boxing. He loved, in later years when he had this beautiful wife, he loves her. They've had children. He loves the game of chess. One thing, apparently Lennox played 4 hours of chess a day while in training. So, I mean, this guy, he was really a cool guy. I remember liking Lennox at the time, but this doc, you like Lennox even a bit more.
It's hard to not root for the guy. It really, it really is. Like you said, after you watch this film, and it's fun. There's a quote in this movie from one of Lennox's trainers, and he basically says, when Lennox decided to retire, he basically says, "Well, when you're already the heavyweight champion of the world and you're laying in your silk sheets with your beautiful bride, gets a little harder to find the motivation to go out and train." And I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's kind of what happened to Lennox. And I'm not saying that he got lazy. I'm saying that, okay, I've been, he boxed. You got to understand too, like his career was pretty lengthy. I want to say he went pro in '88. So,
89.
or '89. So yeah, like '89 to 2003. Guys,
Yeah.
that's a 13, 14-year career. That's long in any professional sport. I got news for you. If you're a baseball player and you string together a 14-season career, you had a pretty good run. So to do that in a combat sport where we all know you're literally taking blows to the head on a regular basis, I mean, what else did he have to prove? He made plenty of money, and I think that what Lennox did that a lot of fighters don't do is, boy, like deciding when to walk away from your sport is such a difficult thing. And I know it must be challenging because, I'm sure Lennox turned down a fucking fortune because I'm sure a return fight with Klitschko would have put 10 million bucks in his pocket, if not more. But you know what? He decided to hang it up and not go down the familiar path that a lot of, unfortunately, when boxers do this, you really see the difference. They stick around too long sometimes, athletes. And when a baseball player sticks around too long, well, maybe his batting average drops. Maybe he doesn't hit 30 home runs, he hits 20 home runs. When a fighter decides to stick around a little too long, they get physically beat down and you literally watch them get beat to a pulp, and it ain't pretty. And I've seen some of my favorite fighters hang in there a little too long and maybe try to come back for that extra payday or just to continue their legacy, or hey, maybe let's not make it about money. I'm sure it's a crazy adrenaline rush to be in the middle of that fucking ring and having tens of thousands of people screaming your name and knowing that there's millions of people watching at home. Yeah, man, that's a fucking drug right there. So I get it. It's hard to walk away, but Lennox walked away right at the perfect time.
Hey, Tommy, real quick, I just want to mention that's actually Peacock, not Hulu, that people can watch this movie for free with their Peacock subscription. And I wish we were getting kickbacks from Peacock and everybody else. But, Tommy, I was looking through the notes of this thing, and these notes are, I guess, 6 or 7 years old at this point. But it's interesting to me creatively what Sam Eilertson, the editor, yourself, my contributions as a consultant, where a lot of times say, cut down this part. And a few of the notes I had were cut down on the Commonwealth Games. And I'm watching the documentary, The Finished Piece. There's really not much said about the Commonwealth Games. Cut down on Mike Tyson. I put that in there a few times, and it seems like that was accomplished. To me, Tommy, I would be interested in your take on the creative process, because what occurred to me while watching this documentary, Tommy, even the fact that when you look it up on Peacock, it says Tough Love, and then when the movie starts, it says Lennox Lewis, The Untold Story. So there's two different titles there. But to me, um, the creative process with a documentary where there's so much information, so much story, so many angles, so many interviews, it's almost like there's there's more than one correct way or one good way to edit this documentary. But if you had done it you meaning in general, had done it in a bad way or a less than entertaining way, it would really stick out. But because there's so many ways to do it well, it's hard to say like what the perfect way would be. I don't know if that makes any sense, but maybe you can pick up the torch on what I'm saying here, because there's so many ways
Yeah,
this
I
thing
can
can
tell
be
you right
presented.
now, I think that our biggest goal when we worked on this movie was, all right, so you and I have been doing the show for 42 minutes now. And Action episode 60 is at the 42-minute mark. And we've been talking pretty heavy boxing the whole time. And I think that we've been trying to do our best to explain it to the non-boxing fan. But if you weren't a boxing fan and you stumbled upon this episode of An Action, you might flip it off. I get it.
Sure.
And I thank you for hanging in there with us. But that right there was kind of our approach to this film. You know, again, we know that boxing has an audience like this, and it's a pretty good audience, but we wanted to reach this audience. You know, we wanted to reach the audience that maybe doesn't give two shits about boxing, and we just wanted to tell a really compelling human story, which is why you'll see a lot of focus on Lennox's childhood and, you know, kind of how he grew up. And really interesting that he's a man of three different nations, and we got into that in the documentary. That's again Kelly Maloney. Like, how do you market a man who's, you know, she tried to market him as the British gentleman. Okay, that kind of worked. Then he kind of turned into this Jamaican Rastafarian, type. Again, that's when all the weed smoke and stuff kind of came out. And then overall, it's like he's kind of shifted. Who is this man, Lennox Lewis? So for us, I think it was all about trying to tell a story that the casual sports fan, or I should even say, let me rephrase that, the non-boxing fan would still be able to watch this and care and like you did, kind of fall in love with the Lennox character. And for me, I mean, what I love about boxing, and here's what I really loved about working on this movie. Here's what I love about boxing. It's a solo sport. It's just you in that ring, but it's really a team, and it's more of a team than anybody realizes. I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's really exciting to me to know that, when you watch this movie and Courtney Shand is talking about a fight, he doesn't say Lennox fought. He said we fought. When we
Right.
fought this guy, when we fought this guy, when we went and fought that camp, because they're a fucking team. Because it literally takes all those people to make Lennox be the best Lennox he can be. And I think that this documentary, without really pounding it home and being a boxing doc, does a good job of showing that support system that a boxer has when they go to camp for 8 to 12 weeks, when they literally go to a facility to train for a fight, and like your family's not there, your friends aren't there. This is your family. These are your friends. And I think that this movie has a lot of, aside from Lennox, really cool characters. And I say characters, like for example, I love the character Joe Dunbar is a cool character. He's the guy who like works with Lennox's blood. Just a ton of really cool appearances. And again, if you're not a boxing fan, it's kind of interesting to see that, like, yes, although there's just that one man in the ring or woman, it takes a whole fucking team of people working really hard every single day to get that guy or girl in shape to take down a championship.
Well, Tommy, it's and I agree with everything you said. His to got to give Lennox's mom credit though, because Lennox's mom came to one of the camps at least and made dinner for everybody and made all the
No,
food.
she
And
would. No, no,
yeah,
listen, when I said Lennox's mom wasn't around, I just meant as a child. That's true.
right.
There was I want to say, and again, this was a long time ago, but I want to say while Lennox was living in Canada, I want to say that his mom was like working elsewhere, working abroad, or maybe when Lennox was in Jamaica, his mom was working in Canada, and then she sent him to Canada, like she sent
Yeah.
for him, like she saved enough money to send him up to live with her. But yeah, Lennox's mom was, I think you could say like one of the kind of spiritual leaders in the camp. You know, she cooked for everybody and kept everybody in good spirits, and again, just like what a great guy. He's got his mom with him at camp. Like, how could you not love this guy?
Tommy, I really enjoy the doc. It's fun hearing Dr. Dre, say a few of the words that I wrote or some of them, and knowing that you and Sam put a lot of hours into this thing. And I hope that people, if they've come this far to the 46th minute with us, hey, we've done basically half the doc. So go watch the doc. It's because the doc is all these illustrations. And for me, Tommy, as a fight fan, growing up and watching a lot of these fights. I mean, I remember going to my buddy Vincenzo Accabucci. How's that for a Rhode Island Italian name, buddy? Vincenzo Accabucci over there in basically in Providence, Rhode Island, watching the first fight in March of '99. And then we were all pissed off. We're all screaming at the TV when it's a draw. And then we're like, ah. And then 8 or 9 months later, we're all back at Vinny's place watching the rematch. And then when when Lennox gets the hard-earned decision, we're like, okay, now everything is okay in the world. And I
Yeah,
remember,
I'll tell you, man. I remember distinctly watching that the fight you mentioned in Memphis. Lennox Lewis versus Mike Tyson was a very big deal in terms of like people were talking about that fight big time. But the truth is, a lot of the true boxing fans and like boxing aficionados, they knew like Lennox was going to kick the shit out of Tyson. They knew, like, if you knew fights and you had been following the fight game, it was very obvious that the Mike Tyson in the ring in 2001 was not the Mike Tyson that we all grew up watching in those exciting knockout highlight videos. It was a different man altogether. And I think that, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think Lennox took it easy on Tyson. Like, he dumped him in the eighth round, and like I think he could have like seriously fucked him up really badly if he wanted to. If you'll look like towards the end of that fight, like Lennox is almost like pulling punches and like taking some mercy on him. It was not a pretty fight to watch. And I remember I was one of the kids who I was all jacked up and fired up for. I wanted Tyson to win. I was a big
oh, right.
Tyson mark at the time.
Sure.
So I remember just thinking like wait, when are we going to see the 1988 Tyson? Like, when is that power punch going to snap into play? And the reality is, one of my favorite lines about sports in general, Mike, guess who always remains undefeated? Father
Father
Time
time.
always. Father Time remains undefeated to
Oh,
this
God.
day. So it's really sad. That's why it's great to see Lennox got out when he did on top. Guys, this has been a really great time reminiscing. Mike and I could talk about boxing. Probably we could do a 10-hour show on it. And I do want to say this, it brought back a lot of fond memories because I had a lot of really great times in the editing room with Sam working on this movie. And, this was a really exciting movie. This was the first time I produced anything and got a producer credit, quote unquote. And that was a big shout out to Chad Verdi for, getting behind me and supporting me on my first producer credit. So it was really fun to work on this movie. David Bateman did some of the music on this, I believe. David Bateman is just such a talented guy. We've talked about him quite a bit on the show in the past. So this show is always fun. I say this a million times. I'm not going to beat it over the head, but I love just reliving a lot of these memories. You forget about you really do forget more of the shit than you do that you've done than you ever will can even dream of in this business, because there's just so much happening, and so much goes into every project that when it's over, you almost have to like delete it from your brain. Otherwise, you go insane. So that's why I like doing this. I'm going to check in with some of our gang here. Um, let's see. Laza's all fired up. Laza is all fired up. Uh, what is the quality of weed like these days? The concern. What do they mix it with? Listen, people are always worried about their weed being laced with something. And I'm always like, why would the weed dealers want to lace it with anything? That would cost more money for them. They ain't going to give you anything for free.
Mm.
Um, Laza says, when it comes to alcohol, I don't have premix whiskey, bourbon. I like to mix a bottle of cola. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I like a little whiskey and Coke. Let's see. Let's see. I remember being shocked when Rama got the win over Lewis. And then Lewis avenged that loss though. Lewis,
Immediate
like
rematch.
Mike said, he may or may not have trained quite as hard for that one, and he paid for it. Even Tyson couldn't beat Lewis, so Rodman had a good victory when he did. That was kind of like the Buster Douglas of Lennox's career. I think Lewis even beat Tommy the Duke Morrison.
Yes.
Yes, that is accurate. He kind of whooped Tommy Morrison. The Duke and George Foreman had a classic fight. It was like a heavy bag. Morrison was really landing shots. Morrison was a great fighter when he had his head screwed on right. Andre Sanchez, we can always count on Andres for a wonderful emoji spread. This is very elegantly done. Lots of love to you, brother. We really appreciate you supporting the show all the time. And here we are, 60 episodes later.
He
Imagine
did
that.
beat
You
David
could,
Tua.
yes, he did. David Tua was a fire hydrant. He was a tank of a guy. Beat him in the boxing world. Yes, he did. He kicked his ass. I think he knocked him out. Scott, fun episode, by the way. Thank you, brother. We appreciate you hanging in. We hope you had an awesome workout. Yes, 60 episodes. All right. Thanks, my
Hey.
friend. We'll be gearing up for episode 75 over the winter. I'm excited for that. Maybe we'll do something special for 75. Tommy, I wanted Tyson to win. At the time, I was pissed off that he lost, but it's funny. I'm in the same boat, brother. Like, at the time being, I was a teenager, like I was so pissed that Tyson lost, but now as a grown ass man, I'm like, you go, Lennox. I'm happy that you got the victory. All right, guys, this has been fun. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I've got a new show that I'm really excited about called Rushmore, where we rank all of our favorite everything from pop culture. We're talking movies, we're talking sports. Like, for example, this week, I'm going to edit the show tonight. We just did an episode on our favorite school movies for back to school. So a lot of fun school movies on that one. You can bet your ass I got Fast Times at Ridgemont High on mine, along with Billy Madison. There's a couple of teasers for my school movie list. So, guys, thank you very much. Also, if you have any ideas for future topics that you'd like us to jump into, feel free to drop that down in the comments below. And Stephanie wants to know what we're doing for episode 100.
Oh
You know
boy.
what? We're gonna do something really special. That'll be about 40 weeks from now. So, that'll probably be like what, the beginning of summer, or end of spring next year. So come see me during baseball season of next year, and we'll be planning our 100th episode. Also, one more quick shout out, and I'll have more information on this. I'm doing my first ever live show, guys. I'm doing a live filmmaking workshop. Details are coming. It's going to happen in October. I would love, love, love to get as many of my and action people to be part of it as possible. So I will be sending more info on that as well. Mikey, did you have one more thing before we hit the road?
Yeah, just a quick thing. But we have to give our congratulations to our honorary third host, the silent, unseen host, David Gear. I think it's okay to say. I don't think he'd mind. But he's expecting, or his lady friend is expecting, and he did
That's
post on
right.
he did post on social media, so I think it's okay to share. Otherwise, he would have kept it to himself. But David is a great guy. David Gear is a film producer, and he's produced a child in this magical world with Chelsea. It's on. The child is on the way. I guess I won't say anything else, but because he posted on social media, I would feel remiss if we didn't give a shout out to him and the fetus and the mother of the child. And it's very exciting. And I'll just leave it at that. But I didn't want to forget about that because we talk about these film projects, Tommy. But a great thing about these film projects that you do, David does, whatever I do, is the people that you meet along the way. You know, the scripts and the editing and the tapping of the fingers on the keyboard. That's all well and good, but without the human element, what the hell are we doing here? But I'm very excited for David because I think it's pretty cool that he's in this situation here.
Yes. Big shout out to David Gear and Chelsea Vale. We're very excited for them. Like Mike said, it's very cute. They produced a child together. And yeah, man, these movies come and go, but the relationships that you make, both on and off the set, they last for a long time. And we're very happy for David and Chelsea. So we'll see you guys next week. And yes, Laza, I'll tell you what, if you do join our Patreon channel, I will send you a little something extra special because you are a fan of both shows so much. So I appreciate that, brother. Yeah, thank you for everything, guys. We'll talk to you soon. See you next week.